And of course, this is going after one of the world's most wanted, well, the world's most wanted man at the time.
Yeah.
Right? Just flip back to this. Can you just tell us about how you, as a civilian at the time, went and chased Bin Laden?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to OG The Soy. I'm truly honored to have Mr. Mike Bruggink here, a man that has lived many different lives.
It's a pleasure to be here, man.
An extremely interesting story, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here, man.
Thank you. So let's just take this back to the first time you ever came to Thailand, and we'll just go kind of chronologically through the journey.
Yeah. So this was 2001. I was probably 19, and my mom's a flight attendant, so I could fly for really cheap. And I just kind of like looked at a map and was like, all right, I want to go someplace tropical, exotic, inexpensive, and just very different from America. And I was kind of choosing between like Costa Rica, Colombia, Thailand, or the Philippines. And then I kept on thinking about Thailand. I'm like, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. So I was like, all right, Thailand it is. And I told my family what I was going to do, and they were freaking out. They're like, you're going to get kidnapped. You're like, all these horrible things are going to happen to you. And I was like, you guys, people go there all the time. You don't even understand. And I just went straight to the airport, I booked a flight. And my mom knew I was going to Thailand. Like, she just somehow knew. And like they all just accepted it. And then...
But Thailand 25 years ago wasn't, the major tourist destination and as friendly as, as it is today, right? So Mum did have a justifiable reason.
I guess. But then once I got here, everybody was just so stoked. They're like, oh, this is an amazing adventure you're on. And, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Beach, with Leonardo DiCaprio. But that was like back then, Khao San Road really was like the mecca of backpacking in Bangkok. And now it still is to an extent. But like at that time, going there was just like a destination. And this was before everybody had smartphones and everybody was like living off the Lonely Planet guidebook and you could buy secondhand books on that street. And it was just really like you could stay for $2 a night at these little, dingy hotels. And so that's where I started my journey. And I stayed for 2 months on like $1,300. And then I went to a Buddhist monastery in the south near Saratani. And I lived like a monk for like 11 straight days, like no talking, 2 vegetarian meals a day, sleeping on a wooden table. And it really did change my outlook on life. And I was like, okay, like someday I'm going to come back here. I'm going to live in Thailand. And like that's been my dream for many years. And then to actually do it was just awesome.
Wow. And did you kind of know anything about the kind of Buddhist teachings before you came, or was that something you discovered when you were here?
Yeah, no, I was raised in a Christian family. Like I had to go to Sunday school every Sunday, and I didn't really want to. It was just part of the thing. I had to go, And then when I started, so I was on a bus ride to Cambodia, sitting next to this girl, and she was like, hey, there's this monastery you can go to at the end of every month. And like it's for foreigners, and you pay 1,000 baht for all your meals for the 10 days that you're there. And I was like, really? I was like, okay, I'll come back. I'll do that. And just the stuff that they taught us was so logical and just really like meditation. Really, it's a meditation retreat. Like, and it's for anybody. Any religion could do it, or anybody of any religion. And I just really enjoyed it. And ever since then, I've pretty much identified as a Buddhist. Awesome. So, yeah, I didn't know much about it, but I'm really glad I went.
They're kind of teachings of like principles for life, right? That's the main teachings. And how did you think that kind of those teachings instilled into a 19-year-old Mike, right?
Changed my perspective on a lot of things. And then right after that, 9/11 happened. And then I went straight into the military. And I felt like it was a really good thing that I did that in Thailand. And I had that adventure and I learned about Buddhism because I felt like I was kind of immune to the idea of being brainwashed, which is part of the military thing. Like generally people fall into that, like that, you start getting told all these different things about your job and what your role in it is. And like,
but their idea is to break you down and build you back up, right? Exactly.
Yeah. And I felt like I kind of was detached from that. Like I knew who I was to an extent, and there was only so much they could tell me about, about who I was that I didn't already know. So
did you know you were going into the military whilst you were out here in Thailand?
I did. Yeah. Like that was my plan. And of course, 9/11 hadn't happened yet. So that was just like more motivating than anything. After that, I felt like it was, like World War II, when Pearl Harbor happened, like I would imagine a lot of people got motivated and were like, all right, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to do my part. And so that's what it was like for me at the time. And also I wanted to get something out of it. I wanted to get, a free college education and all those kinds of things. So I ended up getting that.
So how did that military career go?
Well, it wasn't like they sent me to the great places of the world, man. My first duty station was Korea. So I was stationed at the border, the DMZ, between North and South Korea. And that was like the longest 15 months of my life. It just felt like it was never going to end. But we had a great gym on the base, and I just stayed fit. I was just working out 6 days a week, just trying to stay motivated and just keep my eye on the prize. Like, one day I'm going to get out of here. And then I was like, okay, I've got 1 year left in the military. I'm going to go to Fort Lewis, Washington, not too far from Seattle. I'll get myself like a nice hippie girlfriend, and like I'll just chill on the weekends in Seattle. And they're like, no, you're going to Iraq, dude. And I was like, wow, okay. So,
what kind of military were you in? What was your
Army? So I was a cavalry scout. So that's like reconnaissance. We work with tankers. We work with helicopter squadrons. And then my job as a scout was to be in a Bradley, or in the case of Iraq, it was a Humvee. And you basically just go in front of all the other elements of the battle squadrons.
Your first man in.
Basically. I mean, you've got, Special Forces does their thing and the Rangers do their thing. And then, we would kind of work hand in hand with infantry. It was very similar to what infantry would do. But, when you're in a war zone like that, it's just like they just find whatever they want you to do in that particular region. And that's what you end up doing.
Mm. So two tours of Korea and
then Iraq, and I was like, okay, like I've had enough of this. Like, it's been fun, and I just couldn't wait to get out. I mean, that was I was never looking at it like I'm going to do 20 years.
Yeah,
like I was going to do my time, have that adventure, get out, and then go on to I would make a list of all the different things I wanted to do when I was in the military, like a vision board, like they call it these
bucket
days.
list.
Yeah, like a bucket list.
What was top of it?
Go to film school, make movies, travel the world, be my own boss. And so also like I wanted to kind of do like the private contracting stuff for a little while because I saw how much money was in it. And so I did that. That was like the first thing I did. First I moved to Prague, and then I just never had been to Europe before. And I was like, all right, I wanted to move to Thailand, but since I'd never been to Europe, I was like, all right, I'm going to start off there. And then I got a job working in Kuwait as private security. It was a really like good paying job at the time, like close to like $100,000 a year. But I was like, okay, I've had enough of working for people. I did 3 months there, and this was in 2005. And I decided I was never going to work for anybody ever again. And I've stuck to it. It's been almost 20 years. Yeah. And still I've managed to keep that going. But yeah, it was pretty hit or miss there for a while. Like these were really, dangerous spots I was being sent to. So when I did get out, it was just like, I felt like I was winning the lottery in life. Like everything after that was just house money,
Wow. So these kind of situations that you were going through, like, was that kind of, when you're there, did you think this was like the career for now? Like, this is what I'm going to go through mission after mission, or, and just being grateful you came out of it?
Well, I mean, like I said, I always wanted to be self-employed. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I definitely wanted to make movies, and I wanted to be a filmmaker because I'd worked as a production assistant when I was 18 years old in Florida. And I was like, all right, if I could do any job in the world, this would be it. And it's not like when I do those things, I don't even feel like it's a job. Like that's what I said. Like I could do those kinds of things, but I couldn't do like a 9-to-5 job where I have to go report to somebody every day. But when you're working on a movie set, it's just so much more fun than regular life. Yeah. And so that was like a real motivating factor for me. When I got out, I was like, I'm going to get involved in filmmaking in some aspect.
It's quite a wild aspiration, though. From being a soldier.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go make movies.
Right. And from growing up in Wisconsin, where you don't know anybody that's, I've never met an actor before or a director or a producer or anything like that. But then I moved after I quit my job doing private contract, I moved to Thailand, moved to Phuket.
What year was this?
This was 2006, I want to say. Maybe, yeah, late 2005, 2006. and I just came here to train Muay Thai. There was Y Muay Thai, and I was like, all right, that looks like what I want to do. And then I ended up buying a bar that was called the Muay Thai Bar.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
associated with the camp, and I got a really good deal on it. And I was like,
Was it in a similar area to where it is now?
not too far. It was kind of in Neiharn, like a little bit away from the gym, but right next to the, like on the way to the beach, maybe 300 meters from the beach. So it was a great spot. I think I spent like, I don't know, 500,000 baht or something to get this place. And it was just a dream come true to have a bar, in a tropical paradise. And
I think you're quite lucky you're not still at the bar.
well,
like some expats.
yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. It was a dream to do it, but then when you're actually doing it, and like everybody just wants to drink with you if you're the owner.
Yeah.
So it just becomes this lifestyle of like, all right, I'm here because, I'm at the bar and people are expecting to drink with me. And it just wasn't really my lifestyle. Like I was more into the gym, and I was also training at Tiger Muay Thai from time. They were the only gym on this soy that we're on right now at the time. And this place was just completely empty. So that was cool. There's this guy named Ray Elby who was teaching the MMA portion of it. I don't know if you ever heard of him. But yeah, it was a trip, man. Yeah, so.
Must be even more of a trip coming down this road today.
It's wild. Yeah.
Seeing how much it's changed.
Yeah, I keep on thinking I'll run into one of my ex-girlfriends or something. But so far, so good. That hasn't happened.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
So you had your bar here in
Yeah.
Thailand. What progressed you into almost going back into the military world?
Well, nothing actually. Like I never wanted to go back into the military. As I was owning this bar, like we would always put on fashion TV, and there was a Philippine version of fashion TV, and this guy who owned it was this German expat who was like a billionaire. He was one of the original investors in Amazon. So he went to the Philippines and started a film school in Cebu, and was also like a production company, and he owned fashion TV. So every 30 minutes a commercial would come on with this tropical film school with a sound stage, and I would always tell my friends, I'd be like, I'm going to go to that film school someday. Like there's just something about it that was just drawing me there. And they were like, okay, cool. And then when I sold the bar, that was the first place I went. I booked a ticket to Cebu, Philippines, paid my tuition, and then landed at the airport. They picked me up. I didn't know anybody in the Philippines. And they were like, as soon as I got there, everybody was like, dude, you look like an actor. And I'm like, oh, thanks, but I don't know anything about it. And they're like, well, can you act? I'm like, probably. I mean, I think I could. And sure enough, I just started doing like all these commercials and these little short films. And then a production company from LA was in town scouting for a movie. And I just got tipped off about a casting call. And I went there. And then all of a sudden I had a part in this, action movie. And yeah, that kind of started off the back into the film world, So that was a dream come true, and it was just amazing. And I stayed there for 2 years. It was scary at one point. At one point, I was completely broke. Like I spent all my money, sold the bar, but then I had to pay for film school. I had to buy a car. I didn't have to do a lot of these things, but I did it, thinking I would like somehow figure it out.
Yeah.
Like who cares if you're broke? Like just, well. In retrospect, it was pretty scary to spend all your money. In the Philippines, it's not like being in America or the UK or somewhere. Like if you're broke, just go get a job. Like stay with your parents for a month or two and figure things out. But
Zero safety.
I had like $50 in my bank account in the Philippines, going like, dude, what am I gonna do? And then this movie came along, and it changed my life. All of a sudden, I had some money. I could work and pay the rent and have money for food. And then that didn't last for too long. And then I was at a party one time with all these rich Filipino people and expats. Like this was like the upper crust of Cebu society. And one day I'm at this party thinking about how I'm going to pay the rent, which is due in like 6 days. And all of a sudden somebody just started talking about HGH, peptides. Mm-hmm. And this one lady, she was really wealthy. She's like, my daughter went from the shortest girl in her high school in like the 10th grade to the tallest by the end of the school year because she took HGH. And she goes, Mike, do you know about HGH? I'm like, do I know about HGH? Yeah, like that's my thing. Like I've been taking it for years. And she's like, can you get me a year's supply? And I was like, I did the math, and I'm like, yeah, I could. And then another person overheard our conversation. He was like, "Hey, can you give me a 6 month supply?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd be happy to." And I, turned up a little bit of the profit margin, and I was like, "Okay, wow!" Just in that one conversation, I had enough money to live for like 6 months, and I was like, "Wow, okay." So I think I've got something here, and also that started in Thailand too. Like my buddy from PPN, like we were talking about peptides for, I think the first time we probably ever met, we were talking about melanotan,
Mm-hmm.
and I started selling it to people from the gym because they were just like, "Dude, how are you so tan?" And I would buy it from China, start injecting myself, and then next thing you know, I'm like the tannest white guy, in Phuket.
For those people that don't know, what's a peptide to the average man?
A peptide is just a branched chain of amino acids. It can be 2 amino acids or more connected together. And for example, HGH is 191 amino acids all linked together. I think melanotan might be like 20. But it's when it was explored. Also, peptides are proteins. So like IGF-1 is the part of HGH that builds muscle. Tesamorelin is one that burns fat. A really popular one for fighters is BPC 157. A lot of times that's combined with TB500 and MGF, and that is just like the ultimate healing peptide. If you have a torn ACL, MCL, you have a shoulder injury, anything like that, that is like the Wolverine peptide. It just could change your entire life. Instead of getting surgery and spending 6 months recovering, you might be healed in 2 weeks or maybe less. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it.
It's incredible stuff.
It really is. Obviously, I've done my own research as well. Not too by any depth of knowledge, but like to a kind of a guy walking down the street that goes and Googles peptides, it comes up that they're safer than anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
Right. It's the safe option, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But they're not as popular. It's a growing market, right? But they're not as popular as the anabolics because you get more of a result, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, you're going to get more of an instant result as far as building muscle with anabolics, but with that comes side effects too. It creates a negative feedback loop. So if you were to take testosterone, next thing you know, your natural production is going to be much lower than it was before you started. And there's different peptides you can take that would trigger the positive feedback loop, such as HCG, which is a peptide, HMG. All those things can help, but once you start going down the anabolic road, it's really hard to get off of it. You might have to be on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, the rest of your life, because it's never going to get quite as high. And the more cycles you do, the lower your testosterone is generally going to be after each cycle. And like for me, I came here, I'm not going to lie, I've done testosterone and cycles myself, to where at this point, I'm 43. Generally, I'm on TRT now for the rest of my life. And I still take peptides to kind of enhance my lifestyle and whatnot. But, I'm able to take much smaller doses than the average person because I've got things like HGH and I've got all these other peptides to keep me young and keep me going. So I would, like, if people that are listening to this, if they're stuck choosing between anabolics and peptides, I would say my advice would be to go the peptide route, and just, it might not be the massive size gains that you would get with anabolics, but it's safer. It's going to be you're more of a natural physique that you're going to get out of it, and you're going to recover faster from workouts. And also it's legal. You don't really have any issues with traveling with peptides. Nobody really cares. I've traveled all around the world with them. Customs has gone through my bags. They see peptides. They don't care. If they see vials of testosterone without a prescription and trend and things like that, well, you might have issues.
And also in terms of the sporting world, like peptides, would they come under like a VADA testing?
It depends. Yeah,
it depends,
there's some sanctioning bodies that would test for it because it does have an effect on your hormones. So it might not even say specifically what the peptide is that is banned from USADA or whatever sporting body that you're a part of. But like for the Olympics, for example, or for Major League Baseball in America, yeah, they would be banned, most likely. In fact, we had a client, a guy who I think was in the minor leagues of the MLB, and he got caught with one of our peptides. And like that definitely had an effect on his career. So, but the thing is also, these are very short acting. So like one of our testosterone boosting peptides, you could take that and 3 hours later get tested and it wouldn't show up. Whereas if you were taking injectable testosterone with, a long acting ester attached to it, like an antate, for example, that's going to be in your system for probably a month or two. So it's going to be much easier to get caught. And I'm not saying anybody here should cheat or do whatever, but like if you're injured and, it's between that and surgery, well, it seems like it's a no-brainer. Get to BPC 157, get the TB 500, and just heal yourself. And you're not going to run faster. You're not going to jump higher, but you're going to recover a lot faster.
Yeah, I've seen it. People getting heel hook, their whole knee ripped off almost.
Yeah,
back on the mat in 4 weeks.
Exactly. Or if they've got a fight coming up, like instead of not have to cancel the fight, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks later you're back and you're almost good as new.
So, I mean, is the world taking to peptides? Like, is it just a growing market?
Oh yeah, it's huge. I don't know if you saw. There's one called semaglutide right now.
Yeah, Ozempic.
Yeah. We've been selling that GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, for the last 15 years. And only now is it becoming hugely popular because, it's this weight loss.
And some celebrities have taken it.
Yeah, even South Park just did an episode about it where Cartman goes from, being huge Cartman to small Cartman. And it's all about GLP-1, about semaglutide. And it's funny because I know the creators of South Park. And so I sent them a message. I saw it the other day and I messaged Trey Parker's wife, who's my very good friend. And I was like, hey, it's pretty wild hearing Cartman talk about peptides. But yeah, it's definitely becoming really, really popular these days. And that one in particular is changing the industry. I mean, now the lab I work with is selling probably, if not $500,000, $1 million a month worth of these peptides.
I think with the peptides, from what I've seen, like, obviously the benefits are there, and I've done quite a bit of reading about it. But like, the thing that puts me off as just a consumer walking down the street is like, if you want to consume it, it's almost like a science experiment that, you got to put the vials and the water and mix it. And I think if they can crack that code where, for example, Ozempic, you can get it in a pen. Right. Some growth hormones do a pen, right? That it's easy to consume.
Yeah.
Then I think like you're off to the races.
Well, that's always been one of the key parts that would stop somebody from doing it. The fact that you've got to inject it and that you've got to store it in the fridge and you've got to mix it with water. But I've got actually my scientist that I work with, he's created a gel version, which is just you rub it on your forearms, get out of the shower, your pores are open in your skin, put like 4 pumps on each forearm, rub them together, and it gets into the bloodstream that way. Wow. It's a bit more expensive. People are a bit skeptical of it sometimes, like how can that possibly work? But it really does. We've also got it now in an oral version, which we haven't really quite sold yet, just because, like, to get my scientist to stop doing what we're already doing, which is making the injectables and selling, like I said, huge volumes of it. It's like, all right, to now get him to shift his focus, and because he got this technology, this oral, and it's amazing and it actually works, but it's been a bit slow out the gate getting that to the market. I really want to start selling it because I think it's going to be huge. People that don't want to inject and don't want to feel like a science experiment, it'll get them the results they want. It's going to be a bit more pricey too.
I think also, like, these days, the Wolverine stack, like, I mean, that's branding almost, right? Like, yeah. I want the Wolverine, so I just hurt my calf. Like, I want it. People, it sounds more sexy and it's going to do something. And I feel like this wave of, peptides coming into, knowledge of just the general people on the street, like, is because of people are branding it almost like other supplements, like a protein powder or something like that.
Yeah.
Would you agree that the peptide market is coming up to that in terms of there's going to, like, there must be other stacks of peptides that give you certain benefit, the Superman stack or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's been huge. I haven't really had to get a job since 2005, but I mean, yeah, peptides have been growing and growing, and every year they just get more popular and more people know about them. There's one in particular called epithalin, which was developed in Russia during the Cold War.
Is this your favorite peptide?
It's my personal favorite, yeah.
Tell me why.
Because it slows down the aging process. It basically instead of aging like a 43-year-old, I age like I'm 15. So it protects your DNA. Like, you know, on a shoelace, it's got that plastic tip.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine your DNA strand is like that. And on the top of that DNA strand is what would be called like the plastic tip, which is telomeres. Epidendrin extends the telomeres, protects it. So instead of it breaking down throughout the aging process, it stays intact. And it also increases melatonin production through the pineal gland. It decalcifies the pineal gland, which might sound like some hippie woo-woo stuff, but it actually works. And you sleep better, you look better, you have more energy, you dream like amazingly. You can actually do things such as like astral project and do lucid dreaming. A lot of these things that, you know, sound like it would take psychedelics or something in order to get to that state, but it really does seem to increase intelligence, slows down aging process, heals you from injuries faster. And that one, like in Russia and Ukraine, people know about it. It's pretty popular. But like, because America, there's so much money that's being made from, you know, the illness industry, really. It's not the wellness industry. It's they want you to be sick.
Big pharma.
Yeah. So big pharma can continue to make all these billions of dollars. And if everybody's healthy and if their DNA is intact, well, that doesn't really serve their bottom line, you know?
Do you think there obviously is that big pushback from globally, right, from big pharma that's trying to keep kind of peptides quiet?
Yeah, yeah, and they're always trying. I think I heard something like 6 months ago. A lot of people started hitting me up. They're like, "Oh, peptides have been in the news. Like they're starting to crack down on them, and the FDA is not allowing them to be manufactured." And I haven't had that be a problem for me. Like we still continue to make them. It's still above the board. A lot of times these are sold as research peptides. So, you know, I can't sell them to a compounding pharmacy, which will then sell them to consumers. It's got to be to scientists, to clinics, to researchers. And of course, then they can find out, you know, their own ways of taking them or doing experiments with them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think the market is going anywhere. In fact, it's just going to continue to grow. And like, you know, it's amazing to see, you know, semaglutide and Ozempic coming out because, well, I mean, obesity is a huge problem, you know, and I think also, it's tied in with insurance companies. Like if people are continuously obese, it's not helping them. Like eventually these people are going to have to go in for diabetes treatment for the rest of their lives. And like if we can somehow, you know, get other peptides, you know, with this kind of popularity, I think it's just going to be great.
Until big pharma come along and see that you're trying to extend everyone's life.
Yeah.
And not get them sick.
Yeah, enough of that.
Awesome. That's a really interesting like insight into this world. I mean, it's a grey kind of area to a normal guy walking down the street, you know, and it's kind of like new innovation, right? People are talking about Wolverine stacks, Ozempics, which is mainstream media, you know, it's on, you know, UK news all the time. But it's interesting to see one, like, you know, how long ago this all started. It didn't start yesterday, right?
Yeah, no. Like I said, the first one I ever heard about was melanotan, which was developed, I believe, in the 90s at the University of Arizona to help prevent skin cancer. Because one of the best defenses against sun damage is having naturally dark skin. So this was developed for people that were already going through chemotherapy or something like this for skin cancer. And so they were like, couldn't leave the house, like without slathering on SPF 100 and going out at night. You basically were confined indoors. And so the University of Arizona came up with this particular peptide. And that was the first one I ever tried. And, you know, one day after 2 weeks of taking it, I was here in Shillong. And I remember waking up in the morning to shave. And I looked in the mirror and I'm like, something's different today. Like, I thought I looked tanner on that particular day, but I wasn't sure. Because, you know, when you see yourself every day, it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
And then I went to the gym just down the street here in Shillong. It was called Shillong Gym at the time. And I was just, you know, going about my daily life, and everybody kept on coming up to me and they're like, dude, like, how are you so tan, man? Like, what have you done? You're ridiculously tan for a white guy. And I'm like, oh, it's this peptide. It's called melanotan. And then they were like, wait, what? What's a peptide? And I would explain what it is, and it's injectable. And they're like, dude, can you get some? And I was like, yeah, I can, obviously. And so I started selling it to people I knew from the gym. So that was my first foray into, the entrepreneurial side of peptides. And that's been my life ever since.
Question I guess a lot of people would want to ask is, are there any bad stories of people taking peptides?
I mean, the worst I've ever had is from melanotan, where some people, myself included, it will turn your moles darker, or you might have freckles on your skin, on your face that just appear out of nowhere. It kind of looks like you got hit by somebody like threw dirty oil at you, and it just kind of permanently stays on your face or wherever on your body. That's been the worst of it, and you can get that lasered off. So that's really the only side effect. Also, if you have cancer, like IGF-1 or HGH could potentially make those tumors grow. So, I mean, I haven't personally ever had it. I don't know anybody that's ever had it happen. But if I knew somebody had cancer or was, having symptoms of it, or they thought they might, I would probably steer them away from peptides. I mean,
it's common sense, like it's meant to make you grow, right?
Yeah, literally has growth in the name. Yeah. So probably, if that's the case, then stay away from peptides for a while.
Awesome. And of course, this is going after one of the world's most wanted, the world's most wanted man at the time.
Yeah.
Right? We'll just flip back to this. Can you just tell us about how you, as a civilian at the time, went and chased bin Laden?
Yeah. So I was...
That's crazy about it.
It was pretty wild. I'm not going to lie. I was living in LA at the time. I'd left the Philippines.
This is after movie school then?
Yeah, this was after movie school in the Philippines, but then I was going to UCLA film school. And this was right around, 2011? Yeah. And, it's been almost 10 years since bin Laden had, masterminded 9/11 apparently. And I was taking this class at UCLA about how to turn a true story into a movie. Mm-hmm. And I just had this stream of consciousness thought just enter my mind. I'm like, you know what? Nobody cares about bin Laden being hiding in a cave anymore. It's been almost 10 years. It's like we've just forgotten about this. And it just seemed like he would never get caught and that he was just out there living his best life in Pakistan or wherever. And I was like, this just doesn't sit well with me. Somebody needs to go make a movie about hunting that bastard. And I'm like, you know what? I could do that. And I was like, I should do that. I'm going to do that. And then this dude was sitting behind me. He was in the Army too. And he was like, dude, I'd go with you. And I was like, for real? I was like, all right, dude, I'll get your number, man. And everybody in the class that heard me say this was just like, dude, that's a great idea. Actually it's crazy also, but you should do that. And I was just like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this. And so I figured he was in Pakistan. I had this idea to come in as a boar hunter. And that way I'd be able to legally bring in sniper rifles and be walking around and with somewhat, tactical gear and things like that. And I figured I would go boar hunting for a week. And then after that, go hunt.
How did you come up with the idea as a boar hunter?
I don't really know. I think, I started Googling hunting trips, Pakistan, and something came up on boar hunting. And I was like, there we go. That's it. That's the ticket there. And so then I went to the consulate, the Pakistani consulate in LA, and I gave them my passport. I paid for the visa. And they're like, I bought the rifles. And then I kept waiting for the visa, and it just wasn't coming. And I went down there once or twice. I'm like, hey, what's the status of my visa? They're like, oh, you just have to keep waiting. Eventually it'll either get approved or denied. And I'm like, dude, it's now been 2 weeks. And the Pakistani embassy is sitting on my passport. I'm like, I don't like that. So I went down there. I'm like, give me my passport back. They're like, well, you're probably not going to get the visa then. I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. Thanks. So then I went straight to the Afghanistan consulate. Now, I didn't think bin Laden was in Afghanistan, but I just wanted to get this started. Instead of just sitting on this idea, I had all the tools in place. I had some money raised. And I'm like, all right, I can just go to Afghanistan, check that off the list. And then I could get into Pakistan through the Chinese border on the old Silk Road, the Karakoram Highway. And so my plan was to do that. Me and this dude from film school, we went to Afghanistan. It was crazy, man.
Can you fly at that time direct to Afghanistan?
Yeah, you can. All of this was really easy to put together. It wasn't as challenging as you might think. Like even getting this guy to go with me was just like one conversation. He's like, I'm in. I'm like, oh, okay. And I didn't have to pay him anything. He just wanted to come. And, getting tickets to Kabul was easy. I landed in Kabul. That was a bit sketchy. You hear things about like Taliban taxis where people would just, you don't know if you're getting into a taxi that's run by a terrorist and he's just going to take you to his cousins. And,
Did you have someone there to meet you?
I did. I had this logistics company, but I expected somebody with like my name on a sign at the airport and there was nobody. And I was like, dude, this is sketchy. My buddy was already sketched out. And I'm like, all right, just relax. Like, we'll find this out. And we walked out of the airport and like, there was maybe 10 or 15 taxis all in a circle, all these guys standing around. And one guy just looked like slightly less menacing than the others. And he was making eye contact with me. And I just like walked straight up to him. And he goes, are you Mike? I'm like, yes, thank you. God. I'm like, dude, I've been waiting for you. He goes, okay, cool. And like he took me to this 5-star hotel, which you wouldn't expect to find in Kabul, but it gets attacked every year. It's called Kabul Serena Hotel. Now it's under Taliban rule, so I wouldn't suggest going there now. But even then, it was pretty dangerous. And then he took me to his boss, who had a logistics company, and I'm like, all right, I need a vehicle. I need AK-47, grenades, armored vehicle if you have it, bulletproof vests. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm filming a documentary about traveling. So I never told these people what I was up to. And then I was like, all right, I want to go here, 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 and here, and here. And they're like, dude, those are dangerous places. I'm like, I know, but that's where I want to go. And so, me and my buddy had GoPros and we had, pretty good cameras at the time. We were filming everything we were doing. And, it was a hell of an adventure, man. Like we never really got close to Bin Laden, but it was just kind of like getting this process started.
How long were you out there for in Afghanistan?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was the day to day like after you'd got your,
Oh man. Like every day was a new adventure, like I would say, I want to go to this place and I want to do this. And then I'd have my buddy kind of trailing me with cameras. And like one day we went into a cave and once we got to the entrance of this cave, all these guys just show up, these Afghani dudes. And they're like, dude, you can't go in there. You're not Muslim and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I got an AK-47, dude. I think I'm going in there. And they were like, I guess you can go.
Find anything in there?
Yeah, it was wild, man. Like I'm sure they had weapons too, but like they didn't want a firefight just to stop me from going in a cave, And then I told this logistics company, I'm like, all right, I need motorcycles. And they're like, oh, dude, it's kind of hard to get you motorcycles. I'm like, I'll pay more money. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll get you motorcycles. So at one point, like I'm riding around Afghanistan by myself with a bulletproof vest on, AK-47 strapped to my back, and a motorcycle. And I'm like, this is wild. Like I'm officially entering territory of like, this is wild shit right now. Like I don't think too many people do stuff like this. And I lost my crew. Like I didn't know where they were. They didn't know where I was. And I remember I was going around this corner near a mosque and this guy on a motorbike, an Afghani dude, wiped out on his motorcycle right in front of me. So like the normal thing to do would be to help somebody out, So I put the kickstand down and I walk over to try to help this dude. And the look on his face was just like pure terror. Like, can you imagine? Like I'm in the rural Afghanistan. Here's this white guy with an AK-47 and bulletproof vest just shows up out of nowhere. And he starts yelling and like freaking out. And then all these people must have heard the commotion coming out of this mosque. Next thing you know, there's like 150 people on the street walking towards me. I'm like, oh, I'm in a situation right now. I better get the hell out of here. Like this guy's going to be fine. I might not. So then I just hightailed it out of there and I made it like, maybe 5 or 6 kilometers down the way. And I just kind of waited for my guys to show up and find me. And it was pretty adventurous, man. I was like, okay, I'm definitely not in Wisconsin anymore. I'm like, this is definitely like a step above your normal adventure,
I think it's probably one of a kind adventure. Really.
Yeah, it felt like it at the time, man.
Not many people go out there as a civilian to go and look for the world's most wanted man. This
is true. Yeah. And even like when I tell this story to other veterans or anybody really that knows me, but especially I think other veterans, like they don't quite know how to feel about it because like it's wild. I don't think most people would do this. Like it takes a certain kind of commitment and lack of fear, I think, to do this. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I wouldn't do that. And I don't know, like I never really catch any flack from doing it, but I can tell just people like don't really quite know what to think about it, you know. But I think it's great, honestly. Like I'm stoked that I did it. You know, it's a story I'll have with me for the rest of my life. Obviously, I didn't catch the guy, but I wasn't far off in my thinking. Like, so I came back to LA on my 30th birthday. They killed him at the peak of the party. Like I had this party on the roof of my building in Marina Del Rey. All my friends were there, and I was in the bathroom at the time. My phone rings. My buddy Miguel was like, "Hey man, they just killed Bin Laden." I'm like, "Yeah, sure they did, dude." He goes, "No, they just killed him." I'm like, "Dude, come out. Like, you'll see." I was like, "Okay." And I walk out, and the party's just going crazy. Like, it went from like, you know, an 8 to an 11. Like, everybody was just like raging, like it was New Year's. And I was like, holy shit, they just killed him. And I was like, the coincidence of all coincidences, seriously, like of all days. And I'd only been back for like not even 2 weeks. And I was just blown away. And I didn't quite know what to think because I spent so much money on this adventure of mine that like I didn't really know where to go from there. Like, but obviously I went on the news. That's what like people that were at that party were like associated with the media, news people, reporters that were friends of mine, and they're like, "Dude, your story is wild. Like, we got to get it out there." So the next day, I was on the news. Huffington Post wrote a story about me. AOL.com, Yahoo.com. I was on like the front page.
Well, that literally is a once in a lifetime story.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, man.
Not too many people would even attempt to go and do that.
Yeah.
You know, have you decided to go after any other like wanted men in the world?
Yeah, actually, I did. So like my plan was just Bin Laden. It wasn't to keep this going, but I had a meeting with a literary agent in LA, and she was like, "Look, we can get you a book deal or something because this is wild and like nobody does this. So just keep on doing what you're doing." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, like hunt more terrorists." I'm like, "Well, there's only one Bin Laden, and he's dead now." And they're like, "Well, yeah, but there's got to be more." And I'm like, "Well, there is." So I started getting online, and I'm like, okay, the number 2 most wanted person in the world at the time was a guy named Zulkifli Abdir, who lived in Mindanao in the Philippines, not too far from Cebu, which is where I went to film school. And so I have now, and I had then a large network of Filipino contacts and people that, you know, I trust, who could maybe put me in touch with different people in the military and find ways of getting down to Mindanao where I could, you know, maybe catch the second most wanted person in the world. And so I went to Cebu. I went back to this island where the film school was. I had a buddy of mine who was like helping bankroll this too, and he wanted to be a part of it. And his crazy ass, he was like, "Dude, we'll inject myself with an RFID chip, and then I'll get kidnapped, and then you'll come after me with the military, and then we'll know where he is because they'll basically kidnap me." And he was willing to be human bait, and I'm like, "Dude, this is crazy."
Full sacrifice.
I'm like, "You sure you want to do this, man?" I'm like, okay. So that was pretty wild. Like, he was willing to do it, and I'm like, if you're willing to do it, dude, I'm willing to go ahead with this. And one day, shortly after coming up with this idea, I go down to this hotel lobby where he was staying in Cebu, and I just get on Google and I type in Zulkifli Abdir. And on the first page, like maybe number 5 result, was a story about me, about Michael Bruggink hunting Zulkifli Abdir in the Philippines currently. And I was like, okay, like if this dude Googles himself, he's going to find out that I'm coming after him. And like, I'm not hard to find, especially in the Philippines. Like, I stand out. I was in movies there. I was in TV shows. And just like, look at me. Like, I don't look like a typical, you know, Filipino. Like, I definitely stand out when I'm there. And I was like, dude, I think maybe we should pump the brakes on this. Like, also, I just wasn't as passionate about hunting that guy as I was Bin Laden. Like, that was the idea. Like, to get a book deal would be nice, but like, do I want to die in the process or have my buddy get kidnapped and beheaded? Like, no. Like, you know, there's other ways to get book deals. So that was kind of it for the terrorist hunting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is a crazy little adventure there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Something forever you're going to look back on though, right? Like,
oh, for sure, man. And like, people still Google me to this day. Like,
It's still there.
Yeah,
Check
yeah,
myself.
it's not going anywhere. And I recently enrolled in a college in America called Wesleyan University because they were willing to give me like a free education. It's like a $90,000 a year
Wow.
school, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go. And sure enough, I was playing on the rugby team after like 2 weeks being at school, and one day, everybody Googled me and they were like, dude, we found out some things about you. Like, you hunted Bin Laden? I'm like, yeah, I did. And they're like, you worked in movies? You were an actor? I'm like, yeah. And then like people were like, is this real? I'm like, dude, you guys Googled it. I didn't come up with this stuff. Like, obviously it's real. Like, I didn't make these stories up. So like it trips people out. Like they can't even believe I'm a real person sometimes. But yeah, I mean, anybody could have done this stuff. Really, like this stuff wasn't hard to put together.
The fact is, no one does do it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
I'm going from military, coming out here and seeing Buddhism to going into the military, doing a couple of tours, to going to movie school, to getting into peptides, which is very much what you're doing now. Then going hunting Bin Laden. I mean, this is, a very far-fetched story. You couldn't make it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not even a fiction book would make that up, I might say.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you sharing it with us, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to, man. Like anytime anybody comes up with this, like, hey, did you ever do these things? I'm always happy to talk about it. And now there's this whole, protest stuff going on campuses. So it's kind of weird being on a college campus now. I'm twice the age of everybody there, and I've hunted Bin Laden, and everybody knows it. So like when I go walking past these protesters who are, completely pro-Palestine and whatnot, it's like I can just see like there's this tension. Like they look at me like, oh, there's that guy. There's, like he hunted Bin Laden. He probably thinks we're idiots. And I'm like, oh, I do actually. I do think you're idiots.
If they want to make a difference, let's go over there.
And that's the thing. Like I would have so much more respect if instead of camping out and singing Kumbaya, they would spend their summer holiday going out to Gaza or something and cooking meals. And volunteering with the Red Cross or doing something like that. That's a lot different than camping out and thinking that you're making a difference,
For sure. Last topic I want to talk about. We're going to go down the psychedelic route.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this. Like, it is becoming a prevalent thing that like psychedelic, what were seen as drugs, are now coming into like actual medicinal approval, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of therapies involving MDMA, ketamine in America predominantly, right?
Yeah.
And what was your kind of experience / take on all of this?
Honestly, it's shocking sometimes that this is even happening, especially with Thailand too. Adopting cannabis and talking about making MDMA legal and mushrooms, but in America too. Like this is just it came out of nowhere. It seems like. And I think it's amazing. Ayahuasca, I think, really, like imagine, the CIA kind of created the crack epidemic in America in like the 1980s. Imagine if instead of doing that, they created the LSD movement or they promoted, DMT and ayahuasca. We would have such a different society. And now, we're dealing with fentanyl and we're dealing with meth all around the world, which is destroying lives, destroying society. You could take all the mushrooms you can possibly grow and you're not going to hurt yourself. It's probably one of the safest psychedelics out there. MDMA, you've got to be somewhat careful about. You can only do it maybe once every 2 weeks or you're going to potentially damage your brain. But you can have, and ketamine as well. Treatment-resistant depression can be treated with ketamine with amazing results. And so I think all of these, I have experience with all of them. I think it would be just so beneficial if they weren't criminalized throughout the world and instead, have narcotics detectives and everybody focus on the ones that are killing people. Focus on fentanyl, focus on meth, focus on crack and cocaine and these kinds of things and let psychedelics heal people. It can, I've seen people go to ayahuasca ceremonies in Colombia and get like 10 years worth of therapy done in one weekend. So it really can just help your life in so many ways that, I'm not out here telling people to do psychedelics. Like a lot of people, especially at the school I go to, like they hear my stories and they're like, oh, this guy knows about DMT, this guy knows about LSD, this guy knows about mushrooms. And they always want to talk to me about it. and I'm always happy to, but I'm never out there to like, you should do this. Like now you should, maybe improve your life by doing it. Although like, I think a life that's interesting, that's, worth living probably has a psychedelic experience wrapped up in there too,
Sure.
Like I've even suggested to my mom, like, try tripping on mushrooms one day. You might enjoy it. Like, and I gave her a chocolate bar, with mushrooms, and I hope and she wants to do it. She's even open to like going to ayahuasca ceremony or something like that. But it's not for everybody, like if you're prone to schizophrenia or if you're prone to psychosis or things like that, I wouldn't say like, okay, you're going to be fine 100%. Like go ahead and take acid and take shrooms and call it a day, because you never know. That could trigger something where, you don't come back from that in a positive way.
Are you an advocate for, I've seen like, obviously not just taking it recreationally, like there is actually like therapy involved with whilst you're under the influence, right? I've seen this in America.
Yeah.
It's a whole process of taking it and some form of healing, right?
Absolutely. Especially like with ayahuasca, it's not just about the moment when you're doing it in a ceremony. It's about integrating it into your life. Same, and you don't necessarily have to go to a clinic. You could do this on your own. Like even if you get on Reddit, like there's a therapeutic ketamine subreddit where people like are really serious about it. They're not just taking it to go to a club and go watch the Grateful Dead in concert and take a bunch of ketamine and just call it a day. It's about, no, like how do I do this and get the maximum therapeutic benefit out of it? So there's different things you can do with different compounds, but yeah, I strongly suggest like doing research before you would do it. But then there's also microdosing too. You can microdose LSD, you can microdose mushrooms. There's something called iboga. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's an African psychedelic that can get people off of heroin without any withdrawal symptoms. It's just incredible stuff. So like a lot of times you'll have to travel to these far-flung places to do it, but not necessarily. You can source these things if you're willing to kind of skirt the traditional laws and whatnot, which again, I'm not advocating people do, but there's ways to do it. And you can save yourself a lot of money. But also, like even America, you can go to ketamine clinics and you get IVs and like do it in a clinical setting under supervision of a doctor.
So does something like a ketamine therapy session, does that make you hit the K-hole?
Oh man, yeah. If you can, I highly recommend it. K-holes are fun, man. Yeah, there's nothing quite like it. Like it's just like your brain is along for the journey. Like imagine like being on a water park where those lazy rivers, and you're just sitting in this tube and you're floating, and you're along for the ride. You're not paddling, but imagine seeing the most amazing Technicolor psychedelic light show going on in your head, combined with the right kind of music, and you'll have a feeling of like oneness with the universe. And like I've really never had a bad experience on ketamine. Well, other than I've taken it one time. I went to a movie and I thought I was in the movie. It was called Late Night with the Devil. And I literally...
What a movie to be in.
Yeah, dude. I hit a K-hole. And when you do it in public, it's not really ideal. But I did. And I ran out of the theater, like through an exit door, and then I couldn't get back in the theater. And I was like, oh, shit. Then I was stuck outside, and I was like, fuck, man, how do I got to get out of this K-hole before I can get home,
There is no exit button.
Yeah, you just got to ride it out, But yeah, I wouldn't suggest doing it in a club. I wouldn't suggest doing it in a place where you might run into problems. But doing it in the comfort of your own home or with friends, in a safe place, then I think you're probably going to be just fine.
Awesome. And I do look forward to see all these kind of alternative, and I call them enhancements, right? Be it a peptide, be it using a drug to psychologically help you get over something like depression, or there's something that's not mainstream pharmacy really.
Yeah,
like, you can just look at the fiasco with this vaccine.
Right.
What's happening now? People don't have that trust anymore.
No, there's still people that think like this was a great thing, and I'm like, really? Like, after all of this, you're still on board with like 7 boosters, and like clearly it didn't do what everybody thought it was going to do.
But you wouldn't try a mushroom to help your depression or PTSD,
right?
Like
yeah, like it's got to come from a doctor with a prescription. But now you can get ketamine you know. So and yeah, like DMT is like probably the most amazing thing I've ever taken.
Well, tell us about that. What is DMT?
Okay, dimethyltryptamine. So it's produced in your brain. It's also produced by toads. Was one specific toad called the Sonoran desert toad, which is 5-MeO-DMT. But NN-DMT you can source from plants, and it can get synthesized. Typically, in ayahuasca, you would drink it, and just powdered DMT. You would smoke it, you would vaporize it, and it's a short-acting psychedelic, probably the most powerful psychedelic in the world. So imagine like getting sucked in through a black hole, spit out the other side in a matter of 1 second, and seeing sacred geometry going up and down the walls, and these vibrant colors all around you. Most people are immobilized; they can't actually move. They just watch this light show in their head, and you feel this incredible connection with the universe, with the world, or with God, or whatever your concept of that is. And for me, when I did it, I was able to walk around, and I was like able to like look at my hands, be like, oh my God, like I'm still me. I can still walk, and like I know who I am, and yet it was like Neo in the Matrix, all of a sudden taking the pill and realizing, oh wow, like there's a whole other side of this dimension that I was never even aware of, and it's truly incredible. Like
Is this the drug they say gets released before you die?
Yes.
People say they see their life flash before them.
Very
right?
yes, that is
That's
exactly
the one, right?
it. Yeah.
And do you think that's got a lot of kind of like, call it healing properties? Or
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the active ingredient in ayahuasca too, which, like I said, you could get like 10 years of therapy in one session. The difference is ayahuasca is, it's a drink that gets absorbed through the stomach. So it's a slow acting DMT. The trip could last like 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
It's not quite as intense as smoking it, but it's more of a commitment. A lot of people that I know that go through it, they deal with like generational traumas get brought up, and that gets released. And by the end of this like 3 or 4 day, retreat, it changes their lives. But then it's about integrating that into your life. It's not just about doing it once and seeing the light and being like, okay, this was an amazing experience. It's like, okay, how do I now take that experience and carry it on with me throughout my daily life, and be a more empathetic person, or how do I take those lessons and keep them going, And whereas DMT, like when you smoke it, is just, it can be that. I think you can get those kinds of enlightened feelings, but it's also so intense and so brief that, I don't know, maybe therapeutically it would be in a different category,
A star category.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. People are scared of it. Like a lot of people I know haven't tried it, and they're not quite sure about it because it's so intense. But I think it's amazing. I mean, like I said, I'm not here to tell people do it or don't do it, but I'm really glad I did it.
And I'm really glad you came and shared your experience, Mike. So
Yeah. So much gratitude for having me on here.
thank you very much. Much appreciated, and wish you all the best, man.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Cheers, brother.
Cheers, bro.
Mike Bruggink, OG of the Soy.